Assault rifles in TFD are pretty awful compared to other weapon categories. Even in their own general rounds category, they still fall short of guns like Enduring Legacy for single target damage, and Albion Cavalry Gun for mobbing. Now fortunately the Weapon Core update brought a few changes to some ARs, and today we'll be looking at quite possibly the strongest of the bunch, the EXCAVA rifle. So in this video we'll be looking at my current crit base build for the EXCAVA, breaking down what stats you should be building into, how best to maximise its DPS, and why it's worthy of your Weapon Core. So pull up a seat, and let's get to it. Alright, so let's start talking about stats, because that's what we've been doing over the last couple of builds, and we can just talk about what makes the EXCAVA so fantastic nowadays. Now, in terms of like the firearm attack, it didn't really get changed, but the main thing that did actually come out of this was the fact the electric attack was added to this for a nice 9.5k per bullet. Now, electric attack is absolutely fantastic for Purge Run level 20s, because all the enemies in there are weak to it, and massively weak to it, which allows you to be able to hit over 1 million per shot, so being able to get crits on this is kind of nutty. So building into electric attack, leaning into that side of things is the best way to be able to go with EXCAVA. Now in terms of like rounds per magazine and all the other stats that pretty much exist, they're all kind of middling, but the main thing that really misleads a lot of people when it comes to building the EXCAVA is going to be critical hit rate. Now, to be fair, you would look at these stats, and without looking into the unique ability a little bit more, you would look at it and go, wow, 3% at base, this is absolutely abysmal. I'm just going to do like I do with the Python and just lean into more firearm attack instead of being able to go into critical hits or critical hit rate. The reason why I'm going to tell that's probably the wrong way to be able to approach the EXCAVA is due to the fact that the unique ability, if we swap over to there, building up energy grenades by going through voltage charge, so every 15 shots you land on an enemy within a 5-second window, allows you to build up an energy grenade, and once you've managed to hit 3, which is going to be the limit, you then get plus 15% critical hit rate, so 5% per each. So the 5% is also base, which means that it works fantastically going into gun-based Descendants, going into your modules that's going to be for the gun. Everything essentially multiplies this even further, and that means that through Descendants like Hailey we can achieve 100% critical hit rate. With going into like Enzo, for example, we can easily get anywhere between 98 to 100%. Valby's a little bit harder to be able to build it into, but she can still achieve 74.6% critical hit rate with this build. But so, you know, it's still fairly decent, but obviously the more consistent ones are going to be Hailey and Enzo, and we're going to be showing off a couple of ideas for builds for those, and we'll also talk about what modules you need to swap over between the two for that. Now unfortunately using the EXCAVA does come with one drawback, and that's the fact that you do have to change up your playstyle when it comes to using this gun. Now in the past, when it comes to other guns, especially other guns, and the only other difference is going to be hammer and anvil, you normally tend to go, oh, I need to aim down sights to be able to make myself a little bit more accurate, and I can then essentially lead my shots that way. Well, with the EXCAVA you don't want to be doing that. You want to primarily just purely hip fire with this gun, and the reason why is because if you aim down sight it will then trigger you to be able to fire out your energy grenades, and if you don't have any energy grenades you have no boost into your critical hit rate. So you don't want to be going down that route. You essentially just want to be constantly holding down left click, holding down primary fire. You never want to aim down sight with this gun, and that's essentially the main way that we can get this so it's consistent with the critical hit rate. So now that we've covered what makes the gun unique, let's start talking about how we're going to be building this bad boy up. So this is going to be primarily our Hailey build. This is going to be our 100% consistent critical hit rate, and then I'll talk about what I'd change for Enzo and going into Valby if you want to be able to go that way by going into the next loadout, which is already fully built. Now of course we are shooting this gun, so we do want the first two mods to be going into our rifling, reinforcement and action and reaction to give ourselves the biggest increase to firearm attack. That's going to be going into our base stats, and then we also want to lean into our quality of life. Now the first one that I want to suggest are going to be a rate of fire increase. Now if you've noticed in the community recently we've talked about like minigun builds and everything like that for the EXCAVA because of the weapon cores, because of how the game and the engine kind of deletes your bullets. I'm never going to recommend that you go above 1000 RPM with this gun, and that means that it's going to be consistent for console users as well as PC users. It just doesn't make any sense to be able to go into kind of minigun builds, so if you are doing that I'd recommend that you swap off, but the best way to be able to increase this going forward for like general use is going to be fire rate concentration. Now the reason why I'm dropping 5% of my fire rate is because I want to make sure that more of my bullets do extra damage, so this is going to be firearm critical hit damage plus 6.5%, which is quite nice. On top of that we are going to be helping our reload, because unfortunately with the mods that we are going to be grabbing in a second, we are going to be hurting our reload speed, and we kind of want to be able to keep it as snappy as possible. So the best ways to be able to do this is going to be Recycling Genius, and we're going to be pairing that up with Reload Focus, and that's going to help us out with even more critical hit damage. Now this gives us a nice 55% reduction to our reload time modifier, which does bring our reload time down to 0.9 seconds, but unfortunately we will be hurting that, so it's essentially going to be like nullifying any downsides that we get from our future mods. So we do have 5 mods that are going to be left over, and we're essentially going to go into our element attack as well as our critical base damage. So let's start talking with our electrical side of things. We will be grabbing Electric Enhancement, and out of the 2 mods here, I don't want to be hurting my fire rate anymore. Technically you could make an argument that Electric Gun Barrel would be the better kind of one to be able to lean into, but me personally, I'd rather just take the hit on the reload time modifier and get the 50%, so I've still got a very competitive time to kill, or DPS, when it comes to this gun. So we'll be putting in Electric Priority to be able to increase our electric attack by 50%. Now this is going to be helping us out with the initial damage that we do have on the gun. We also got this extra 30% from our Electric Enhancement. We've also got our 24% that's going to be coming from our Reinforcement, which is our seasonal kind of artifact, and we're getting an extra 50% on all of that just going into from this mod. It is 100% worth the slot in, and I highly recommend that you do chuck that in yours as well. So now we're down to 3 mods, and all 3 of these are going to be dedicated to crits. So in this case, we'll swap the filter over, and we're going to be grabbing our Better Insight, we're going to be grabbing our Better Concentration, and lastly, we're going to be grabbing the big boy damage here itself. That's going to be Concentration Priority. Now this is going to give us a massive 207.8% increase to our critical hit damage. It is going to be hurting our reload time a little bit, but only by 5%, so this is definitely negligible right now. But we are massively increasing our electric attack, increasing our fire rate, and increasing the amount of damage that we will be dealing. Now, you will notice that we don't have any yellow mods built into this, mainly because I don't think any of them really kind of lean into the assault rifle type kind of like playstyle in that kind of sense. There are some fantastic mods out there, but because we're not aiming down sight and we're not making ourselves more accurate, things like Ultra Precision Strike, things like Real Life Fighter aren't going to be helping us. The only one that I would potentially make a case for is if you go build more into magazine size. So if you do swap these 2 out for like an Enzo build, and you swap these 2 out into extra magazine size, you could put Mental Focus somewhere in here to be able to increase it for things like Colossus fights. Fantastic for Deathstalker especially. You definitely could put that in there, but this is going to be our general all kind of purpose, all round kind of build, and this is the best way that I could recommend for you. So to show you that this does indeed reach 100% critical hit rate with the current build that I do have, I'm just going to show you as to how this all kind of works. So once again, we are going to be purely hip firing, because if we do aim down sight, you'll see that we fire the grenade. So let's just reload there. Let's just grab all of our 3 stacks of grenades. As you can see there on the left hand side, we do have our 3 stacks, and then let's activate our Cold Fury, and this is going to be constantly stacking it up. So let's start watching the screen kind of go up, and as you can see, we are getting ever closer to 100%, and then it will tick over. So we do have 100% critical hit rate at max stacks. We do have a 4.444x multiplier on our critical hit damage, and that allows us to be able to achieve some really nasty kind of like DPS, as you can currently see. Is just kind of like nutty all across the board. So we are dealing around about 339,000 points per damage on crit, and this is an enemy that isn't even weak to electric, so we do have that also going for us. Now let's start talking about the Enzo side of things, and we can also talk about Valby. This is going to be the build that I'm going to recommend to you, because we are essentially trying to keep our magazine size a little bit higher when it comes to Enzo. So in that case, I have swapped out the reload side to be able to give ourselves an increase to our magazine. This has given us 17 extra bullets in the magazine, which is really going to help us out with that crit base kind of side of things. You do need an extra mod to be able to help you out with critical hit rate. Now you do have a choice between the 2 depending on how consistent you want this to be. If you're happy with 98% of critical hit rate, then Insight Focus is going to be the way forward, and that will also give you a nice increase to your critical hit damage, but it's also not going to affect your firearm attack. But if you do want that 100% chance of being able to hit critical hit every single time, then it has to be Edging Shot. Just because we've got the rolls that we kind of need, and without going into our weapon cores to be able to help us out, we essentially need that right there. So this is going to be the best way that I would kind of suggest for that kind of build, but this will also help you out with Valby. So for example, if I swap over to Valby right now, So now that I'm on Valby, you can see that as base, we currently have a 35.3% chance of being able to critically hit. If I now stand in water, which are supply moisture, this now goes up to 74.6%. So this is going to be with the edging shot build. If you do swap that out for insight focus, this will be even less. This will go down to 63.8%, but it is completely up to you as to how you want to be able to make this more consistent. Personally, I think you don't really want to go Valby when it comes to the EXCAVA, even though she does have electrical resist reduction built into her skill. So for example, as you can see here at the very bottom with laundry, we do have the electric resist decrease amount. It's really strange. So you can see that we do have obviously critting around about 279,000 when it comes to it. So if I now put this here, we're now going up to 287,000. So it's not like it's a huge amount. It goes up by 8,000 per crit. So we're not really doing much else. But the crazier side of things is the fact that we do have it built into the grenade, that it does extra kind of like electrical resist, so it is like an extra thing on top of it, and now we're doing 288,000. So it's not really worth being able to invest in all these electrical reductions, at least on this kind of enemy that we can see here. But, you know, I personally would only ever go with Hailey or Enzo, but it is completely up to you as to which kind of Descendant you want to be able to rock with this. Now, as the last couple of things that we can cover, let's talk about the rolls on this weapon. The main things that you do want to be aiming for are going to be things like firearm attack, weak point damage, firearm critical hit rate, and firearm critical hit damage. This will give you the most amount of increase the amount of damage that you will be chucking out, but you could potentially chuck in a rounds per magazine if you really wanted to, but personally I think being able to go full on into the increase per bullet is definitely the way to be able to go. So try and get as high of rolls when it comes to that, but as you can see here, even with a blue roll into firearm critical hit rate, I was still able to achieve 100% critical hit rate through using of Hailey. And lastly, let's start talking about the brand new weapon core side of things. Now, we do have some fantastic slots built into EXCAVA, probably only second best to Albion Cavalry Gun, I think, or maybe even Restored Relic. We do have 2 tactical augmentations, we have 1 attribute, and then 2 free augmentations, giving us a lot of freedom to be able to actually go into this gun. There are quite a few ways that you can kind of build this, but this is the one that I've settled on. I do think that being able to go into a roll into fire rate is going to be one of the best ways to be able to go for this gun. It's going to massively increase your DPS. Being able to go for 1 is pretty much all it essentially needs. The rest you can actually go into some nice quality of life. So I do have 2 rolls into rounds per magazine. I would like to be able to get these even higher, especially with core level 10 dropping a little bit later on this week. And then 2 rolls into electric attack is going to be fantastic to be able to, especially in like Purge Run level 20s, but it's going to be fantastic to be able to increase the lethality of this gun with the amount of electric attack that we already have built into it. So I do think you essentially want 1 fire rate, 2 rounds per magazine, and 2 electric attack. Personally, I think this is the best kind of slot, but feel free to be able to mess about with it a little bit more your side. If you want some extra more rounds per magazine, you definitely can drop like a fire rate or an electric attack, but in terms of like the best rolls, in terms of like best in slot, I do think this potentially could be the way to go. And with all that out of the way, that wraps it up on the video for my current EXCAVA build. Back when the gun first appeared, EXCAVA just joined the bunch of guns that you got to level 40 for the Master Rank XP, and then you put it in your stash. Now though, with the changes to electric attack and having some ideal weapon core slots, EXCAVA is feeling amazing and worthy of a weapon core, even if you don't want to use the grenades to maximize its DPS. But this is the section I want to hear from you. How are you finding Season 2 so far? Did you manage to grab a fully upgraded EXCAVA last season from the Battle Pass? And lastly, which weapon would you like to see next with the core unlocks? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video, and as I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, I'll see you all on the next video.